Welcome to A Blind Date with Knowledge, Series 2. We're hosting research discussions across the region. I'm your host, Laura Brady. Today, I'm joined by Professor Vikki Rand, whose inspiring endeavours in the field of cancer genomics put her at the forefront of cutting-edge technique. She's speaking to us as the Interim Director of the National Horizons Centre, the NHC being a hub of innovation in the north, where world-class facilities converge industry and academia to translate research findings into real-world outcomes. Hi Vikki.
Okay.
So first of all, what was the driving force behind bringing the Horizon Centre to life? At what point did you become involved?
Yeah, so I joined Teesside University just over 2 years ago, and this was about the time when the National Horizons Centre opened. So I wasn't here for kind of like the ideas and the building of the building, but I was here for the opening.
Yeah.
And the idea was to bring kind of people together across industry, academia, and also national and internationally, and to be at a hub for biosciences and kind of healthcare innovation and training.
Yeah. So those sorts of themes are really aligned with kind of your motivations as well.
Yeah, I mean my personal motivation, my background's in research and cancer in particular. I'm really keen to translate my research into kind of make that real world impact.
Yeah, so that's cancer genomics, is it?
Cancer genomics. Yeah.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
So I mean my career started on the Human Genome Project at the University of Cambridge, so many moons ago, and then basically just been using that technology and the new technology to understand cancer and pull it apart to identify those drivers and those biomarkers. Just recently published an interesting paper in leukemia on P53 as a biomarker in paediatric lymphoma, and trying to work with colleagues to push that into a clinical trial setting.
So what does the centre mean for the local region? What sort of impacts do you think it will be for the people around here?
So the NHC is already making an impact. So basically we are here and we're working with the local colleges to show students kind of what jobs are in the region, also beyond, and what kind of careers people can have, but also connecting with local industries. So we have Fujifilm, who are a big employer in the region. They're actually in the building next door, in the office next door to me. They're basically expanding and creating hundreds of new jobs, and we're part of training their new cohorts of people coming through, particularly during the pandemic with the Novavax vaccine manufacturing. They increased numbers considerably, so any new recruits kind of came to us to get that kind of initial training.
So that's really good to hear, because that's really sort of promoting the longevity of the research that you do in here by training sort of the next generations of scientists. What sort of things do you offer? How would people get involved if they wanted to sort of go through that?
Yeah, I mean they can contact us directly via the website, but also via local schools, local colleges, through Teesside University itself. Also companies. I mean we work at kind of a higher level in terms of kind of upskilling people already in jobs. So if you're already in a certain area, then we can kind of offer you courses and training to develop new skills or get to new areas. But also if you're kind of a new recent graduate, there'll be opportunities there as well to kind of talk to us about those skills. But it's also with the NHS. So we have the kind of healthcare strand, work on a number of different diseases, so cancer being one of them, but other areas including urology and looking for biomarkers, also like Crohn's disease, working with local hospitals on a range of different projects, and it's working with the kind of different healthcare teams, and also I've just recently got grant funded where we're bringing more patients and public involved, so we want basically local patient, local public there to be the framework to kind of really help to navigate individual projects, but also the future of the NHC and what we do.
That's also great to hear, because obviously that's the reason why you're doing it in the first place, so it's good to collaborate at all. And I think it is one of the things that this centre boasts. You've got the links from the industry, from the academic centres, like you said, the higher education institutes. So in which ways do you nurture those collaborations? How do you keep those sort of being successful? Because obviously you've got a lot of different ones going around. Do you find that people are forthcoming with the collaborative process?
I think it is. It's finding kind of like-minded people, and it's not trying to force things that don't naturally fit. And that's been one of the kind of the focuses since I joined Teesside, was to develop that narrative and kind of develop those areas of the expertise and kind of who we want to collaborate and who wants to collaborate with us. And that's why having the Durham Valley Research Alliance as one of our key partners has been the real driver for me kind of coming to Teesside and making that happen, and linking up with local companies as well. So we have Hearts Biologicals, who are a local company. We have a PhD studentship with them. We're also discussing kind of further funding with them, but it's kind of also the kind of likes of Fujifilm and CPI, who are kind of next door.
That's great. So the things like the Durham Tees Valley Research Alliance and the other partnerships, how do those sort of support the progression and the reach of the research that you conduct here and the work that you carry out? What's the benefits of having those partnerships for you?
It means we can actually make real world impacts. I mean, we're already, my research was very discovery, a little bit of translation, but very discovery end, and it was kind of quite frustrating because I couldn't take it to the next step. So projects I'm working on is really a device in the clinic, and that's being tested, and we're kind of evaluating how good that is in that clinical setting to obviously improve care for the patients, but also reducing the costs and the time burden that a lot of the treatments have. But also we've got new academics coming into Teesside University, so the NHC is attracting kind of real talent into the region, and basically I can connect them directly. So we have a new professor who joined, and then I could connect him through the DTVRA to clinicians, and they've already got grants and projects and clinical trials ongoing, which has only been a matter of months, which is a unique fantastic experience.
It's really superb. It's facilitating the flow of knowledge, like from the outcomes of, like you said, discovering something. It's a very different thing to having like it translated into an outcome that can be implemented on a day-to-day basis. So what sort of projects do you have going on at the moment? I know there's various areas of work. So with regard to the disease specific work, what sort of pathogens are you looking at, and what sort of techniques are you applying to understand like the translational aspects of that research?
So the disease specific side of it, so we have a number of cancer projects. So we're partnering with a company called RareCan, who is quite a unique kind of business model, really. So a lot of kind of samples are usually in biobanks and obviously charity funded and things like that, but this is actually a different way of doing it in terms of getting patients to actually sign up to be part of that biobank, rather than from a patient point of view from the clinic.
Exactly. Is it Professor Andy Hall?
Yes.
I think I heard him talk about this. It's a really inspiring project. Like you said, it's not the usual sort of business model.
And it's fantastic because we're already doing a pilot project with them, so we are sequencing a number of cases with them to kind of basically just get the whole pipeline set up. So as they grow and as we grow, we can kind of do research projects with them. The idea is for the rare cancers, they don't often get to be part of clinical trials because the numbers are so low. So how can we strengthen that by getting the numbers up, and also connecting them directly with pharmaceutical companies to do those trials? We have, in terms of facilities and other projects, so the NHC, it's quite unique because it's got a lot of different pieces of equipment under one roof. Normally you'd have different bits across different campuses or even different universities. So we've got the opportunity to do mass spectrometry. We've got a water centre of innovation, which is a lot of protein. I'm not a protein person, but we can basically do everything in that mass spec world to look at different molecules. So working with a pilot project at the moment to develop an assay that could link into a clinical trial for a particular disease, and using the equipment that we have to kind of develop that, which is fantastic.
So you don't have to really go off site there. It's like your hub here.
I mean, we can get patient samples directly to us in different sources. So some come fresh, some come in paraffin, which is kind of basically when you have a biopsy, the tumour gets put in basically a lump of wax.
The little tumour blocks.
Little tumour block. Or you can have it kind of stored in a way that we can then put it onto other machines to sort different cell populations. And we can study them. We've got the imaging, we've got the equipment for that, so we can look at individual cells. We've also got genomics, so we can sequence, and that's my background. We're using all the new technology, so Nanopore, which is a tiny kind of handbag-sized sequencer.
That's what's it called, Nanopore?
Nanopore,
amazing.
MinION, which is fantastic, and that also can be used for not just disease-specific. So we have people looking at diseases in different species as well. So looking at viruses in seals across the coast, and kind of like also food sources and things, and kind of looking at different invasive species and particularly ecosystems as well.
So is that sort of with the mindset of looking after the ecosystem, or kind of does it tell you a bit more about the virus as well, I guess, if it's behaving differently in sort of different species?
It's coming from an ecology point of view, so it's looking at kind of, and then also what the virus is doing, and as we know with the pandemic, and we've become much more aware with different strains, different viruses and evolution, it's looking at that and how those viruses are developing and also impacting the populations.
And just on that note, do you think that the way that the viral genomes were sequenced as a result of the pandemic, do you think that will have an impact on the way that other diseases are treated or other viruses are dealt with now?
I think it's become a bit more mainstream to do the sequencing, because sequencing has always been quite expensive, and also handling kind of viral genomes is a fine art. I'm used to working with kind of human genomes, which is slightly different, so I think it's become much more standard practice, and also in terms of the other resources that come along with it. So databases are really important, so you can sequence things, but you need to compare it against other viruses and what else is going on in the population, and also the bioinformatics tools and the resources that are there. So we've also got fantastic bioinformatics facilities here and Linux servers for all that data crunching.
Well, that's the next thing really, is it? That's where I feel like a lot of the analytics is going towards bioinformatics.
So we have the bioinformatics from a particular genomics point of view, but then also pairing it up with the mass spectrometry is quite unique, because I only was stuck to DNA and RNA, and actually the protein world is much more complicated, but being able to look at a mutation in the DNA and then seeing what's happening in the protein, and also looking for targets, increases that opportunity to look for novel therapies and get involved in more drug discovery in the pharmaceutical companies.
And that just goes to prove as well, like, why it's so useful to have everything here. You know, you can bounce around from, like, looking at from different angles. And
it's all about that collaboration. So when I collaborate with people across the globe, and other people do as well, so we're kind of a hub to bring people together, but also an opportunity for people to come and use our facilities and kind of develop grants together, and so we can kind of work kind of across, particularly when it's talking about rare diseases and rare cancers. It's just increasing those numbers.
And like you said, with the rare cancer, I think it's a good example of being like globally active, because like you said, you don't find large populations of people with these diseases, so it's important to have the global presence. So in terms of digital analytics and the machine learning, what are these currently applied in any areas? Is it what sort of applications would they have, or do they have?
So we have people working on AI in particular, and looking at kind of using AI for diagnostics from a computer sciences point of view, and that's where we're marrying it up with cohorts through the DTVRA, and also those wider collaborations to get kind of, you need the good patient cohorts to get the right AI. And we're also using virtual reality, but we're using virtual reality more at the moment on bioprocessing, so drug.
How does that work?
So manufacturers, from the training point of view. I mean, just for example, if you kind of do a batch for kind of drug manufacturing, you can lose £1 million if something goes wrong in that whole process. So getting people trained up to have that more muscle memory.
That's amazing.
It's really good. And we're finding it. We're planning to develop the virtual reality to other areas as well, because we find that people kind of doing online training, you don't really kind of getting that physical moving around, but actually by doing the virtual reality, you drop something on the floor, you actually bend down to pick it up, and you're actually physically touching the machines, and then you kind of you then leave that and go look at the real machine. It looks the same.
I think that's really revolutionary. I think, like you said about online courses, there's only so much that you can learn from a screen, and like the virtual reality technologies are being implemented in entertainment settings, so it would be you'd be at a loss if we're not sort of keeping up to date with those technologies that we can use here.
So we've got a virtual reality suite where we do that training, but basically really keen to develop ones with particularly local NHS trusts for the training. And we've got some particularly from a surgery point of view, because a lot of it is done on kind of plastic models, but actually with the virtual reality you'll get that real hit a nerve kind of response.
The reaction. Well, hopefully you won't, but by the end of the training. So that's amazing. So what do you think what sort of impacts would that have, do you think, on the patient experience, or for those who are working in the healthcare setting? Obviously, like you said, it would be really useful for training. I guess like people can hit the ground running more when they're working. What do you think from like the patient perspective?
I think the patient point perspective is, from the patient perspective, the dream is to basically limit the number of tests that are needed and basically speed up that diagnosis. I mean, that's the kind of the end point for all of these is to really just speed up kind of how we diagnose a particular disease and how we treat a particular disease. Even using kind of an app-based approach. So one grant which got funded through NHSX with local trust and another company called Health Beacon is they've got a device. It's literally just a very fancy bin that you kind of put on your kitchen bench, and if you have a chronic disease, you get given certain drugs to take, and they're injectables. So basically, when you take your drug, you put it into the bin. It takes a time stamp and it takes a photo, and that information is collected and sent to the clinician. So the clinician can actually look to see what's happening. Are the patients taking the drugs at the right time? And so when they don't have to go have so many more appointments, if they're not, then they can kind of intervene and go, well, why aren't you taking them at these times? But also they know when they have the checkups that if they have been taken at the right time, that they need to then evaluate whether it's the right approach for the treatment or not.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. I've had a couple of conversations with people about sort of wearable devices and like sort of devices that transmit data straight away. And I think in terms of from the trial perspective, it's really, really useful to be using that, especially when it's kind of already implemented in a lot of ways. A lot of people wearing sort of the fitness technology already.
It's also an interesting area to be debating as well, because it's kind of what information you need, what information the patient needs, and what information the clinical team needs at what point. Because obviously we wear the kind of the Fitbits and your Apple Watch, and it tells you what your heart rate's gone up. But actually you'll look at that and go, oh, I need to like slow it down. But if you're in a trial setting, you don't want that personal intervention. So it's kind of having a device which detects things when they get too high, but not alarming the person or putting the steps in place so that you now need to do X, Y and Z. So it doesn't alter the data.
Exactly. And it will be so specific depending on what you test and which data is needed and what's useful.
And how that's managed and stored as well. It's
exactly. Maybe that'll be another episode. We'll have to have a debate on the devices.
Well, it is. I mean, it's NHS and digital is that's one of their big investments. So it's coming, and there's a lot of discussion around it.
So in terms of the bioindustrial and manufacturing efforts here, can you tell us a little bit about those endeavours and kind of how those strategies are optimised here?
Yeah, so one of the kind of the crown, the jewel in the crown, is the Northern Bioaccelerator Partnerships. That's between us, Fujifilm, and CPI. So CPI are on the same campuses. Fujifilm have moved into the labs next door, but also they've got the big site in Billingham, and that's really to bring the whole kind of part of biomanufacturing together. So you have us for the discovery end, then you have CPI who do that kind of next bit of scale up, then you have Fujifilm who are kind of, that's what they do, they're manufacturers of different drugs, and it's bringing that whole ecosystem together to kind of promote the region and what we're doing, and that's just one example. Sounds
like it will be quite a synergetic triad.
It is.
So tell me through kind of like, what does it take to keep this place running, because you've got so many things going on. So what's your agenda like? Do you split your time? Like how much time do you spend in the lab? What sort of things are on your to-do list?
So I probably haven't done lab work for a long time, but that's also the part of becoming a PI and starting your own group. So that really kind of that transition happened probably kind of about over 10 years ago, really, of just starting not doing as much in the lab and more on the data side of it, but then you kind of start writing grants and papers. So now as kind of interim director of the NHC, it's very much about the strategy and reviewing kind of what's working, what's not working, and trying to support people to kind of get the best out of what we have on offer, because it's not just the industry links, it's not just the academic links, it's also the kind of like the teaching. We have master students, undergrad students do their research projects here, and also the links with like local schools. We had a local school with a load of 10-year-olds came in to do various experiments, so it's kind of juggling the whole thing. So it's basically just looking at my diary and blocking out time for deadlines.
I guess it's a lot of interactions, I guess, like keeping those links really strong.
It is, and it's kind of being in that face between industry and academia is a new area for me to be in. I mean, I've got a lot of collaborations. I've worked hospitals across the globe, but that industry link, I've never really worked so much with industry. I did a little bit during my degree working in industry labs as placements, but it's that link which is it's really interesting, because I kind of see that the way the industry world has changed to kind of support academia more, or need academia more, but to kind of identify those pain points and help to kind of identify the answers and the solutions to make industry work better. Exactly. But also the other way around, academia having that focus to ask the right questions and those industry needs, rather than this is what I'm going to be working on. It's kind of that working in partnership is really kind of making those changes. It's
beautiful, really, because that's what it means to sort of have like somebody who's an expert in that field. Like each institution has their own, or each party there has their own expertise, and you don't want somebody from industry asking an academic question. Like you said, it's better for those people to take on their roles and then come together, and like the product is going to be a lot more than the sum of.
And we've got great support at Teesside University, so we voted the third year in the row to be an entrepreneurial university of the year, and it's just fantastic support. I mean, getting those the IPs and patents and NDAs and all these words I hadn't really come across too much all in place is just no problem. It all happens really quickly, so you can actually have those conversations at industry pace as well. Everything happens very quickly, and it's just being able to respond and adapt to kind of to answer those questions.
So how do you feel like it's going? Do you feel like you have adapted sort of to that industry language and the terminology that's needed? Was it a difficult switch over, or?
I think it's finding, kind of one of the early questions as well, it's basically finding those people who are like-minded and enthusiastic what they want to do. And it's kind of having the right people to have those conversations with. There's some areas where that's not where we work, that's not where our expertise is, but we can signpost them to other places, but also we now have people signposting to us to make sure that we get the kind of right ecosystems together to have the right conversations.
And you've got a big variation here for different people to kind of come together and to signpost different places. I guess it's a perfect place to do that. So in terms of innovation, what do you see on the horizon for healthcare and healthcare technologies? What's basically the question is here, where's the future going?
I think it is that kind of the wearables, like we were talking about, and the digital side of it. It's giving like the consumer, which is the patient, kind of more control over and more input. I think with the pandemic, one of the things that has really sped up is that being able to home test. So us all doing our lateral flow tests has made that much more acceptable. And I think without it, so I don't want to say too many positive things about the pandemic, but without that, it would have taken longer to get people to adapt to doing tests themselves. But I think as we've all done it, it's become part of what we do on a daily basis for some people.
I think it is, obviously we can't look back all positively, but it's really good to find those silver linings in terms of innovation and sort of the I guess plateau we might have reached with healthcare. We've broken through that now in the response to the pandemic, and with the wearable devices it becomes a lot more personal, especially where with the genome, like I feel everybody will have a very personalised response to things, and maybe these devices can help to diagnose those on an individual basis. I
think it's just making it more accessible to everybody, and people being more interested in looking after their own personal health. It's not just your heart rate, it's not just your kind of the diet, it's like the whole package, and kind of having more input into kind of what your health.
Oh, that's great to hear, because that's one of the things we do champion as well across the DTVRA, is like making sure that the research that's going on is useful for local people. And
I'd be really keen to hear from local people. I mean, people may not know we're here in Darlington near the train station. We'd be really keen to have open days or any interactions to kind of bring people together to kind of see what we're doing and what's happening on the doorstep.
Well, that's great. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. As always, please get in touch if you have any feedback. Catch you next time.